On today's Locked On Giants podcast, we're recapping all the happenings from today's New York Giants OTA that was open to the media. That's coming your way next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI. You can find our written work over at si.com/NFL/Giants. And welcome on in to my Blue Crew community members, my everydayers, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today's show, the New York Giants went through OTA number 9. There's one more OTA that's on Friday, but that one is closed to the media. OTA number 9 was open to the media. So I have some general takeaways from the OTA. Number 9, I want to talk about the offensive line because there's just something about that I got to get off my chest and share with you. Then we're going to talk a little bit about Daniel Jones. Don't worry, it's not a pick on Daniel Jones fest for those of you who like Daniel Jones. This is just something that, I picked up today in terms of, listening to the what head coach Brian Dable had to say and whatnot. And then I'll close things out with some general observations as always, so a lot of good stuff to come out of OTA number 9. And again, I want to thank you for tuning in and spending part of your day with me. So let's go ahead and get started. What I like to generally do when I put together my OTA reports is, especially this time of year when, they're not in pads, there's no contact, you got to take everything kind of with a grain of salt. I like to look at the bigger picture behind some of the emerging storylines. And there's one in particular about the offensive line that I got to get off my chest. And, you can agree with me on this, you can disagree, but I got to get it off my chest. So Evan Neal, who the Giants keep saying, he's going to start at right tackle and then we'll see what happens from there. They're basically willing to die on that hill with Evan Neal at right tackle. Well, Evan Neal in the first 2 OTAs that were open to the media was able to do some work. He was able to do the installs, which is basically, walking through the play in slow motion, not a whole lot of stress on the body or whatnot. He warmed up with the teammates, did some individual drill work, didn't do 11 on 11. Remember, Evan Neal is recovering from the ankle surgery that he had last year. In OTA number 9, he was on the side to start practice. He didn't even warm up with his teammates. And it's possible that, they were managing his workload. That's certainly possible. I don't know. I don't know how much, if any, work he was able to do prior to OTA number 9 because those practices were closed to the media. But here's where I'm a little concerned. At the very least, you would think Evan Neal would warm up with his teammates. Generally, when a player doesn't warm up and he spends his time on the bike at the start of practice, that's not a good sign. So that kind of caught my eye and had me wondering, okay, what's up with that? Did he, was he sore? Did he suffer any kind of setback? Because here's the thing, folks. Evan Neal is in a make or break year this year. All right. He has to step up. And, look, Carmen Priscillo, when he spoke to the media a week ago, talked about how, good questions, very alert in the classroom, did a good job in the classroom, et cetera. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you've got to do it on the field. And it just seems to me like, this is a critical spring for Evan Neal. Now, Brasillo has some different techniques, different tricks that he's showing the offensive linemen. And studying it in the classroom, that's one thing. Doing it is quite the other. And, maybe I'm making a big deal out of nothing here, but to me, if you're not getting some kind of reps, that's a problem because, how far behind are you going to be when training camp starts and the pads go on and everything, comes down for real? That is a concern for me. Now, again, I don't know. Maybe they were just managing his workload, but you would think he would at least warm up with his teammates, which he did not. Now, compounding things for me with the offensive line, Matt Nelson, the veteran offensive tackle that they signed, who's supposed to be the swing tackle or the swing tackle candidate. Has not worked all spring long, at least in the practices open to the media. So let me get this straight here. You've got your projected starting right tackle who has been limited because he's, still rehabbing from ankle surgery. And you've got your supposed main swing tackle candidate sidelined with an undisclosed ailment, and he hasn't been able to work. Maybe it's just me, folks, but I'm a little concerned about the depth at offensive tackle right now. The Giants have been plugging in Joshua Ezeudu at left tackle when Andrew Thomas, didn't work the first OTA, or I should say the third OTA. And now, they plugged Joshua Ezeudu in at right tackle. And I question if that is a good fit for Joshua Ezeudu. I do not believe Ezeudu that his best position is a tackle. Against Kayvon Thibodeau, he gave up a few pressures. Now, I get it. It's the spring. The offensive linemen can't put their hands on the defenders. They can't get physical with them. So the defense has a bit of an advantage. But you would think you would at least be able to get in front of a guy, cut off the pursuit, slow down his charge. And I don't know. That really hasn't been the case when Ezeudu has been a tackle. So it's early. I don't want to create a panic. For me, that's a position I'm going to be watching come training camp. I do not think that Evan Neal will work in any team drills next week. I hope he will at least be able to go back to doing individuals and working against stare and all that stuff. I don't anticipate he'll do 11 on 11, but he needs the reps. I mean, I think that we can all agree on. He needs the reps. And, the other thing I'll mention about Evan Neal is if Carmen Brasillo had plans of cross-training Neal at guard, for example, even though I think Neal played guard in college, again, Brasillo has different things that he's teaching these guys, and you want to get them on the field. You want to get them reps. Even if they're going against air, you want to get them reps. And I hope I'm wrong, but I just have this bad feeling that Neal's going to start off slow to start training camp. And I hope I'm wrong. I really do. I get it. Ankle injury, the surgery's got to come back. They don't want to rush him. They don't want to, throw him to the wolves, so to speak. Give him a full workload here in May when the season doesn't start till September. But it's going to get late early. So, at some point you'd like to see him get out there and, hopefully he'll be okay. And hopefully he will, turn things around because injuries have slowed this guy down and he's never really looked comfortable playing on the right side. So hopefully Brasillo has a few tricks up his sleeve that can help, that can help him. So that's my takeaway on the offensive line. And again, the Matt Nelson issue, whatever that might be, now you're left with, young guys. And I'm concerned right now about that position. Hopefully, those will alleviate, but we'll see, obviously. All right, coming up next, want to talk a little bit about Daniel Jones. Don't worry, it's good. It's good. Daniel Jones fans, I promise I'm not going to trash the kid. So that's coming up right after this. Hey, Giant fans, passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So go on and keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, eBay's guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and as always, appreciate you spending time with me here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And before we get into segment 2 here, got to tell you, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you all day, every day, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. If you haven't already done so, please check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Who knows? You might see an episode of Locked On Giants on the channel. Sometimes they pick my shows to show up on that channel amongst the entire network, which is pretty cool. All right. In this segment, I want to talk Daniel Jones. And, look, let's be realistic here with Daniel Jones. He's coming off the ACL injury. The Giants are still holding him back, from doing 11 on 11, because obviously, again, the season doesn't start until September, and there's no need to kind of rush him out there. And you don't want to, God forbid, have him suffer any kind of setback. Daniel Jones thus far in the practices and the video clips that the Giants have shared during the days when the media's not in, he's moved around pretty good. Now, here's what's interesting. Daniel Jones is always the type of guy who is chomping at the bit, wants to do as much as he possibly can. Heck, he wants to do everything. If it were up to him, he'd be doing a few 11 on 11 drills, which he has not done so far this spring. And that is by design, obviously, because look, when you're doing 11 on 11, even though there is no contact, you never know. Somebody could fall down, roll into him accidentally, roll up on his leg. All kinds of things can happen. So the Giants have been keeping it to 7 on 7, install, and individuals. So that being said, Brian Daboll was asked about the possibility of Jones, who, again, has been moving around. If you didn't know that he had a torn ACL, you would say, gosh, this guy looks pretty good moving around. So Brian Daboll was asked, is there a possibility that maybe Jones sees some 11 on 11 in next week's mandatory minicamp? And you just come away with the impression that that's not going to be. And, I'm sure Jones, who, by the way, is sporting a beard these days, I'm sure he'd like to do some 11 on 11. But here's why I think the Giants, besides the fact that they don't want him to have a setback, here's what I think is behind their thinking. All right. If, God forbid, he does have a setback, then guess what? Now there's a chance that they've got to start all over again with the rehab, and, it adds time onto when he might be ready. This is a guy who we all know has an injury guarantee in his contract. If he cannot pass the physical next spring, that injury guarantee will kick in to the tune of $23 million. That is a big chunk of change. All right. The Giants do not want to have that hit their dead money cap space if they decide to move on from Jones after this year. So it makes sense if you're the Giants that even if Jones is remotely close to being ready to doing 11 on 11 right now, hold him out. I mean, it's a teaching camp. They're installing stuff, but do you really want to take the chance of Jones, going out there and again, somebody potentially rolling up on his leg and setting him back? So, there's a lot more, like I said, into each decision with regards to, medical decisions. And this one, I'm pretty sure that that injury guarantee is front and center in terms of, what they're allowing him to do. Because again, you look at him and you say, my goodness, he had an ACL, really? But they're trying to be smart with it. And I applaud him for it. Why put Jones out there? Why risk him getting hurt and then triggering that injury guarantee? If you're going to do that, you might as well do it in the game that's going to count for something as opposed to a spring practice where you don't even have pads on and you don't have contact. And it means really nothing other than, teaching your players around you, what the play is and how to run it and all that stuff. So I wanted to mention that because, again, we haven't heard from Jones since I think the first OTA that we were allowed in. I'm sure we'll hear from him next week when we get to the mandatory mini camp. We'll get an update on where he's at, how he's feeling, and all that. But overall, Jones, based on the practices so far that we have been allowed to see, based on the video clips the Giants have put up, it all meshes together. It's not like the Giants are picking select video clips to say, hey, look, everybody, Daniel's on the right track. And, meanwhile, on 5 other throws, he looks like, he can't move. So that's encouraging. All right. Now, real quick, before I get to the next segment, Darren Waller still has not made a decision. Okay. There was some thought that he might announce his decision this week. Folks, all along, I keep saying it's going to be before the mandatory minicamp. And I say that because these OTAs are voluntary. Player can skip them and not be fined and not be penalized. And a mandatory minicamp practice, totally different animal. Unless that player is excused by the head coach or GM, he has to show up. So if you're Waller, wouldn't it make sense to, take the extra time and say, okay, you know what, Giants, here it is. It's next Monday when the players have to check in for the mandatory minicamp. I've made my decision and I'm going to either retire or come back. I think he's going to retire. I've been saying that all along. I think he retires. This way, the Giants get that cap space if he does retire. I think it's something like 11 million plus, and they are set going into the summer. All right. So for those of you who have been saying, gosh, the Giants should cut him, the Giants should make the decision for him, what's taking him so long? Folks, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Going through a divorce cannot be easy. I mean, maybe for some people it is based on the circumstances, but I can't imagine that it's easy. I've never had to go through one. I hope I never do. I hope my first marriage remains my only marriage. But I have known people who have gone through divorces and it just takes a lot out of them because you start to question your purpose in life. And, I have no inside knowledge as to what's going through Darren Waller's mind, but I got to think based on, his expression through his music that this has been rough on him. Based on the how he was beaten up mentally at the end of last year with the injuries, that took its toll on him. The key here, folks, is mental health. And I think sometimes when we call for a guy to make up your mind or, the Giants should make up their mind for him, take into consideration the mental health aspect of it, which is why the Giants are like, look, we don't need the money right now. Take your time, Darren. And, we'll be here with the light on for you if you decide to come back or if you decide to leave, we'll be here for you to help you transition out. So just wanted to put that out there. All right, coming up next, got some final takeaways, some final thoughts. Don't go anywhere. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And coming up for Monday's show, I'm going to do a preview of the Giants' mandatory mini camp. What are some of the storylines? What will I be looking for? What will I be watching? What do I anticipate trying to cover as far as questionings go? I'm going to clue you in on all that good stuff. So hopefully you will check out the show. And then also next week, it is my hope that I will be able to catch up with Ed Valentine for a show, whether that's before the mini camp or after. That remains to be seen. And folks, I know you guys have been asking me for the longest time, when are you going to do a live show with Tana and Bad Dog? And I kind of said to myself, given how crazy it's been around the house and with work and whatnot, that a good time might be after we get done with the spring football period, because we still have the draft to talk about. We've got so much to talk about. We could probably do like a 24-hour show with Tana and Bad Dog. So if I can arrange that, we will do that. I promise you. All right. So that being said, let's get into some final thoughts about the OTA. I think, if you were writing a headline for this OTA, you would have to call it the Malik Neighbors Show. Folks, this kid is something else. He, thus far, has come as advertised. The speed, the determination. I mean, there was one catch in particular, and I think the Giants posted this on social media, where he beat Cordell Flott, and he managed to stay in bounds despite being awfully close to the sideline. He has been, again, everything advertised, and he's still learning. Now, again, some of you will say, well, Pat, there's no contact, so therefore the receivers aren't allowed to jam him and do all this other stuff. And you'd be right. That's actually something that, come training camp, I want to see how he does when he is jammed at the line at the line of scrimmage. And he will be jammed by opponents who will look to maybe, take advantage of the fact that he's not, prototypical size for an ex receiver. So they will see if they can't disrupt his patterns. And, it'll be curious to see how he deals with that. He's been getting some tips from Steve Smith, the former Carolina Panthers receiver, on how to fight off the jam and use his hands accordingly. So we'll have to see, how those tips kind of, factor into his game. Jalen Hyatt was in the news. The problem with this one is, I think what Jalen Hyatt conveyed, he said that something to the effect of, we're a playoff team, which is not exactly what he said, but yet a lot of, online blogs and papers ran with that headline. Jalen Hyatt, first off, definitely bigger. He's added muscle, which he spoke about doing. And, I don't remember the exact number, but, last year, when they were wrapping up the season, he actually told me how many pounds he was looking to gain. He told me he wanted to put on about 10 pounds. So I don't remember what his weight is off the top of my head or what it was last year, but whatever it was last year, add 10 to it, or, getting close to adding 10. But Jalen Hyatt, right now he's confident. He's confident in the receivers. He's confident in the offense. He's feeling more confident in his own ability, to perform at a higher level. Because last year, I think he had like a 54.7% catch rate, which was the second lowest on the team. Only Sterling Shepard, who had fewer targets, had a lower percentage. So, Hyatt, remember last year, wanted to be Rookie of the Year and didn't come close. So this is a big year for him to take a step forward in his development. And, so far he's looked pretty confident, pretty comfortable. But his statement about, the Giants being a playoff team, that's a goal that they have. So I think that statement was taken out of context by some people. That wasn't the kid beating his chest and saying, oh, we're going to be a playoff team. We're going to roll over everybody. No, that's not what he was saying. He was saying that, we're confident. We have confidence in each other. We're confident in ourselves. And, that's all it was. I mean, what do you expect the kid to say? No, we're going to stink again this year. We're going to, we're going to go 5 and 12 instead of 6 and 11. What do you expect them to say? I mean, I guess he could say nothing, but that's not how he rolls. So that story kind of, started to get a little away from, you know, the truth. So I did want to mention that really quickly. Um, some other things, the Giants in special teams, they worked on the new kickoff return rule. That's going to be fun to watch, by the way. I can't wait to actually see that in action. But that's going to be, very interesting. Um, Running backs, there was a lot of talk, obviously, this week with Nick Sirianni opening his mouth. Gosh, like we need another reason to hate the Eagles, right? Nick Sirianni's telling the story a couple days ago about how sometimes he runs into Giant fans and they go, "Joe Giants." And Sirianni says if somebody, in particular gets under his skin, he'll say, "Hey, we got your best player." And by the way, did I miss something, or did Dexter Lawrence and Andrew Thomas sign with the Eagles? I mean, I might have missed it. I don't know. If I did, let me know. But no disrespect to Saquon. He was a good player for the Giants. But the point being is Nick Sirianni, come on. This is the same guy who, you know, trolled the Chief fans when they beat the Chiefs at Arrowhead Stadium, the same Chiefs team that had beaten them in the Super Bowl. This is the same guy who, if you remember, in the divisional playoff game against the Giants, was standing on the sideline, walking up and down like a punk, nodding his head like, yeah, we got the better of you. The dude needs to grow up. I mean, it's one thing to be, enthusiastic, but he needs to grow up. I'm sorry. There's no place for that. And to Brian Dable's credit, when he was asked about that today, Dable just said, "I love Giant fans." He wasn't taking the bait. And, when despite being pressed about it, he said, "Look, I'm worried about, my team. I'm worried about coaching this team. I'm worried about going out there and having a good practice today." How nice is it to have an adult in the room? Seriously. I mean, I get it. Coaches are human. They have emotions. And, heck, even Dable, in the past has popped off. We've talked about that on the show. We've seen it. But the one thing you could say about Dable, I think, is I don't think he's ever trolled another team or another team's fan base, which is just, that's just Bush League. So I give Dable a lot of credit for how he handled the questions today. You knew they were coming. And, even when, he was asked, "Well, do you feel you've lost your best team?" He could have easily said, "Well, we still have Dexter. We still have Andrew Thomas," but he didn't go there. So kudos to him, because I think, any one of us, myself included, would have been like, "What? Did we lose Dexter? Did we lose Andrew Thomas?" So I tip my hat to Dable on that. So anyway, so yeah, that's pretty much it for today's OTA. That's it for our today's show. As always, thank you for tuning in. And again, next week we'll have a preview, a training. I'm sorry, not training camp, a mini camp preview, top storylines, what we'll be looking for, what I'll see if I can't find out, things that, as I sit down and I put together my notes this weekend, what questions am I going to have and whatnot. And I'll just keep you updated regarding guests. If, when I get Ed Valentine on, if I can pull together the live stream, all that good stuff. So that's all coming up next week on the Locked On Giants podcast. Until then, thank you for tuning in tonight, and I will see you next week. Have a great weekend, everybody.